provides technical support to our 24 men-engaged Africa countries, and she coordinates the programs across the focus countries. She's a human rights advocate who's dedicated to advance women's rights on the African. Dr. Anna Nyambezi, who is a senior lecturer at the University of the Western Cape. Dr. Nyambezi received his PhD work in social psychology from the Maastricht University in the Netherlands, and after some years as a researcher for the South African Medical Research Council and the Human Sciences Research Council, he joined the University of the Western Cape, the School of Public Health, in January 2016 as a senior lecturer. His research interests are in mental health with a focus on SRHR. Dr. Nyambezi, please do come forward. Next on my panel is Alanka Malvia, who is the He has more than 25 years experience in governance, HIV, having worked in India, Ethiopia, office for ESA, and now in Botswana. He has authored many papers on HIV, gender, SRHR related issues. Alanka, please take your seat. Thank you.
adolescent girls. They also have laws that are related to issues of child marriages that are not too much in terms of the implementation of those laws and how they can reduce the issues. And then there are issues also of the healthcare services. Some researchers, they do present studies that show that some of the healthcare systems are not friendly to young women, adolescent girls, and you see that there are barriers to the services, and some of those barriers to the services has to do with the quality of care. They still have issues around women, young women wanting to access their services. And some of those issues, they also are related to the issues of also the providers not being able to have the necessary skills to deal with issues such as mental health, because some of the issues are related to violence and mental health issues also, they crop in. So we find that some of the providers are still not equipped or enough to deal with those issues. And of course, the issues of social norms, the researchers also, they show that there are still issues of social norms. Just to indicate that there is a priority research setting that was done by WHO, and if you look at their presentation in the 2024, that report, it still shows that in their systematic reviews, there is still issues that has to do with discrimination of women when it comes to the issues of the services. So it's important to understand that as much as some of these issues are global, some of them are related to the global south, which is something that we need to take care of. I'll stop there for now. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nyembesi. Thank you for really, highlighting the challenges that we're having, particularly with implementation around laws and policies that are supposed to advance SRHR of women and girls, outlining how we're lacking in terms of adequate facilities that provide services to young women and girls, and also in terms of the systems themselves. They are not adequate enough to ensure that young women and girls do have the facilities that they require and do have the access when they do actually need it. And also highlighting the aspect around social norms, which is very, very important because it really goes on to the root of the problem, which brings me to my next question, which is going to go to Cyprian. As a young person who's involved in the implementation around SRH advocacy, why do you think that there's an urgent need to find collective solutions to address the patriarchal challenges that we have in our societies? And why does it have such a devastating impact on society?
Okay, it's worked. Thank you so much for such a good question. Responding to the question directly, we all are in the room. We all agree that gender violence and all of these gender dynamics are really prevalent in most of the patriarchal framework in most of our countries, where it's often disproportionately held by us men rather than women. And we do agree that all of these things, they perpetuate different forms of violence, whether it being economical, whether it being social, whether it being physical or and so whatever. And with that fact, we do know that we've been in the SHR, Sexual Productive Health and Right advocacy for quite some long time, but we've been facing these challenges, including the patriarchal system that are making us as a young people or the youth advocate understanding that most of times as men we have been against women's, and we have not been providing support to them. Because this, as I said, this patriarchal system has been embedded into cultural settings, has been embedded into legal framework, has been embedded into our society systems. And it has been very hard for us to just change this kind of what it has been believed by the society. And coming again to the questions, the negative impact that the patriarchal system has to sexual reproductive health and right, you'll agree with me that first and foremost is the negative impact on health services that it has to us. We have seen in many countries, but also it was in my country, but good enough the government had listened to us and changed the situations. We were using women to bring men to the health facility, as we know that men has low health seeking behavior. So we have target to make sure that maybe we get men to test HIV and have some health services at the health facilities. So in many countries across Africa, we have been, we gave that burden to women, saying that when you are coming to start the ANC, when you are pregnant at the facility, you need to come with your spouse. And if you are not coming with your husband, they have been denying you service without knowing that maybe you was raped, maybe you had an affair with someone, husbands, you don't want to be known, maybe you are the female sex worker, and so all of those things were not looked at all. So we were like denying these women to just access services is only because we want to bring men. And this is only because we are believing in this patriarchal framework that is really existing in the society, in the communities, in our legal framework and so on. But the other negative impact that the patriarchal system that has to the sexual reproductive health and right that I can say is the gender inequalities. I will refer to the UNAIDS report of 2022. It's about if we are not about to address the gender inequalities perspective. We are all working here, sexual reproductive health, the GBV, all of these are cross-cutting issues when it comes to address this pandemic, including HIV. But if we still make this gender inequality perpetuate the violence that are perpetuated by us men, we just fuel the gender inequality, and then it holds us back from reaching our goals and addressing this. So what I can say, we really need a collective action to make sure that we dismantle these patriarchal systems or this patriarchal framework that are as I said, are prevalent and are embedded into our culture, legal framework, and also society system. I can end it for now.
Thank you so much, Cyprian. You really bring out very, very interesting issues, especially around male perpetration of violence and also taking responsibility and taking accountability. You also bring out the issue of the fact that changing social norms is not an easy process. It's something that takes time, and it's something that it requires a lot of investment into if we're going to be looking at what are the drivers of violence within our societies. Thank you for that. I think this also brings me to Runya. Cyprian talked about these social norms and talked about the fact that, you know, the differences between accessing services for men and accessing services for women. We know that the right to health contains important freedoms, such as the right to control, to make decisions about one's body, to be free from violence, coercion, and discrimination, as well as our key entitlements, which include the right to equal access to health facilities, goods, services, without discrimination of any ground. The right to health also extends and is affected by the underlying determinants of health, which also Dr. Nyambezi spoke to, such as safe access to safe and portable water and sanitation, and also other social determinants of health, such as gender difference. How has the intersectionalities that Cyprian also spoke to, how has the intersectionality framework influenced the South-to-South collaboration in generating the insights and understanding around sexual and reproductive health rights in the world today?
Thank you very much for that question, Rumbi. And I think that Dr. Nyambezi and Cyprian kind of make my job here to answer this question easy, because they've already spoken to some of those things. So I will begin by saying that as a feminist, I am quite proud of the intersectionality framework. The intersectionality framework refers to the interconnectedness of social categories, such as race, gender, class, sexuality, and ability. All these things, they shape an individual's experiences and opportunities. The framework helps us to view how multiple factors come together to create unique forms of privilege and marginalization. So the intersectionality framework has enabled us to think about people as a like cross-sectionally, to think about people and all the things that may affect them, that may affect their opportunities, that may affect their ability to access services, to access justice, to access their rights as they exist. So in terms of how it has shaped SRHR work across the Global South, we look at right from the beginning, we look at even the Beijing Platform of Action. It was a key turning point where there was obvious and deliberate global South-to-South collaboration, and the movement included women in all their diversity. And there was that understanding that we can't move forward if the rights of one group of women are met, if the needs of one group of women are met, and the rest are not met. The framework has helped people in the Global South not only to identify points of commonality, but to understand power and privilege and how these are deployed against various groups to entrench inequalities. As Sonke, like BK mentioned yesterday, we strongly believe and promote Ubuntu, and the idea that you are, therefore I am. And because we're here in Kenya, I will refer to a Kenyan saying, unalila ndinalila, tunalila pamoja. To say that when you cry, I cry, we all cry together. So that is the strength of the intersectionality framework, in making us understand that we can't move forward unless we move together. The Global South has managed so well to band together in our diversity, understanding that intersectionality are what helps us build together and to build the required masses, such as Cyprian has already mentioned, the collective efforts that will help us to speak truth to power, like Tumi indicated yesterday. South-to-South collaborations that are intersectional have enabled us to rethink our conceptions of power. For example, now when we look at masculinity, we begin to talk about toxic masculinity versus positive masculinity. We begin to see men not only as perpetrators, but as human beings that have been subjected to the patriarchal social construct that enforces them to exist in boxes. And we begin to walk the transformative journey with men and boys to question what they have for a long time perceived as privilege, to reveal the underlying harm it causes not only to women and girls, but also to men themselves. And the South-to-South collaborations have helped us also to look at the harmful social norms that drive our common challenges, such as child marriage, female genital mutilation, femicide, intimate partner violence, and begin to build movements across what would otherwise be separate issues. I think this was this was also a discussion that happened yesterday, to say that when we look at this room, we see a plethora of thematic areas. There are feminists in the room, there are religious leaders in the room, there are political leaders in the room, there are unilateral agencies in the room, there are young people in the room. So that is exactly what we're talking about, the strength of the South-to-South collaborations as we sit in these rooms, working across thematic areas that would otherwise be separate. The collaborations have helped us to recognize not only our intersectionality as people, where we meet as people, but also the intersectionality of our functions and the intersectionality of the structural issues, such as was discussed yesterday, to talk about where there is the issue of policy frameworks, but there's also the issue of service delivery, there's also the issue of infrastructure, there's also the issue of domestic resourcing, resource allocation. So as we think about intersectionality in terms of people, we also start to think about intersectionality in terms of the actual issues. As we even have the framework that we were referring to yesterday in the morning, the CSW Resolution 60/2, to talk about how it cuts across the issues that would affect individuals, to look at the economic strengthening, to look at access to education, to look at access to services, to not only think about people cross-sectionally, but also think about service provision and rights delivery in an intersectional way. What are the things that we can do? What are the things that connect us, what are the dots that we need to connect to ensure that there is an access to services, there is an access to the rights, not only for a group of people, but for all people. And we continue to foster South-to-South collaboration across our intersecting identities and challenges, being cognizant that we can't afford to have blind spots, seeing as access for some is no good when there are barriers for others. Thank you, Rumbi.
Thank you very much, Runya. I'm really quite excited about some of the issues that you raised, particularly when you're looking at, you know, the intersectionalities, the idea of having that analysis of, you know, it reminds me of an African proverb which says, to go fast, you go alone, but if you want to go far, you have to move with everybody else. And you reminded us when you also spoke about the fact about Ubuntu, and I think that is something that is really found within the South-to-South collaborations and interlinkages, that you are who you are because we are. And that is very important. I think that's a theme that was also coming up a lot yesterday, that we really have to work together. We are here in this room, coming from our different angles, coming from our different contexts, but we're here to work together. We're here because we have a common purpose. We're here because we want to stop the violence. We're here because we want to ensure that people's sexual and reproductive health rights are respected. We want to ensure that women and girls have access to the services that they need. You really spoke about the issues of interlinking, ensuring that it's not just about the rights in isolation, but it's also about looking at it from a holistical point of view. And I think the SDGs as well speak to that, and they provide a very good framework for us to be able to follow. This also brings me to my question to you, Josie. We've been talking about, you know, how are we working together? What do we need to do to move forward as movements? And we know that the Men Engage Africa network is one of the biggest networks that has been working to advance SRHR through gender transformation and through the engagement of men and boys. What has contributed to the success of this network, and what have been the key lessons in building this dynamic movement?
Thank you, Rumbi, for the question. And I'm excited that you've already touched on issues of, I think, the African proverb, which you said, if you want to move alone, you might move fast, but there might be no impact. But if you want to make impact, there is the power of numbers. So I'm happy to present some of the strategies that we've done, or that we're still doing as Men Engage. As you've rightly put it, we are, as Men Engage, we're in 24 countries, and at the center of the work that we do, we believe in collaboration as an approach. I've mentioned that we work in 24 countries, and our work basically as Men Engage Africa is directed by a strategy, an SRHR strategy, which has been built by all our 24 countries. And this is like a guide to, in terms of implementation, obviously rounded by research and a lot of evidence base. So we have a strategy that guides our work. But I also wanted to add on to say, as Men Engage, what we've also done is we try as much as possible to expose our colleagues or our members to spaces like these ones. You know, our linking and learning spaces for the symposium. I think we have plenty of Men Engage partners who are here. But also we link and we work together collaboratively in spaces, your global spaces like CSW, which I think Runya has already touched on, but also engaging with regional bodies. One of our key pillars as Men Engage Africa is we do a lot of capacity building that we provide in country. Our members, they provide capacity for each other on SRHR issues, but also at regional platforms where we continually try to, you know, provide the necessary skills, obviously, which is driven by research and you know, new policies as they come into place. But we are also very big on with working on with partners. I think this symposium is a true testament, where you have a lot of UN bodies, where you have partners like your Frontline. But if we take it even in country, We have a lot of partners that we work with, in all the countries that we work in. So you will see even in Botswana here with our colleague UNAIDS, which was already engaging with our main engaged partners in Botswana. I think the book launch, which was launched yesterday, is a perfect example of how Made Engage works with partners in country. Our work is also guided by the experts in the field. So you will see that Frontline, for example, Frontline AIDS sits in our governance body at a regional level, where they direct work that has to do with SRHR, because they are the experts in the field. Not only Frontline, we have your UN, as I've mentioned, your SAFEDs, etc. But also I wanted to mention that through a lot of funders who are in this room, we have been privileged to access a few pockets of money which we have given to our members to implement work in country, SRHR work in country. So that has sort of like pushed our impact or our coverage in country and also at a regional level. Again, with our partners, we do a lot of joint fundraising as Made Engage Africa, which has also pushed the work that we do as well. Not only joint fundraising, but also joint implementation and joint submission, especially in global spaces. I also wanted to say, I've also mentioned issues of learning spaces. So the symposium is one of that, but we also have what we call exchange visas, where one country can go to another country to learn on various issues on SRHR. But also when we talk about policies, we ensure that not only do we do policy advocacy, we also ensure that language that is human rights based is included in various policies per country, even also at global level, but also pushing for certain languages or certain review of policies. We talk about the inclusion of CSC, but also access to, for example, access to contraception. And I think this has worked. Of course, we have challenges sometimes that we've seen in country or just at a global level, where sometimes Made Engage is deemed to take too much space. But we've, as my colleagues have mentioned earlier on, that we work from a feminist angle, and we work with women's rights and feminist organizations. So we're still pushing, but also there is definitely room for more collaboration and partners with many organizations and partners. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Josie. It's really interesting to see how the Made Engage network has been using different strategies in order to try and build the movement, in order to try and strengthen the movement, and also especially I like the aspect that you talked about, linking and learning, ensuring that there is ownership of ideas, ownership of strategies, ownership of things that ensure that the movement is moved forward, and also the fact that these are lived experiences that are being taken through, and these are also form the basis for policy advocacy, to ensure that our policies are not blind, to ensure that the policies are going to work in the context that they are going to be implemented in. You also raised the issue of funding, which is very important, and this really brings me to the question that I have for Alanka. We do know that there have been a lot of efforts around SRH movement building and looking at how funding flows and donor perceptions, but we also know that there's a lack of sustained attention to funding patterns that look at the particular unique challenges that most of our countries face. It's dynamic, it's always changing, and sometimes this is also linked to, the politics of certain countries, the politics of what is happening in certain spaces. Sometimes it's uncertain. We also know the long-term nature of advocacy. It's not easy to do change that happens in a day, you know. And this really raises critical questions around how funding is understood and how it is implemented. In your experience, what has been the challenges that you have seen, and what are the emerging opportunities that the movement could use in order to advance SRHR?
Thank you, Rumi, and good morning, colleagues. Let me at the outset apologize because some of my comments would be disruptive, and I am doing it intentionally because I think the purpose of these gatherings is also to create energy by disrupting, by challenging ourselves. So let me start by first getting a bit of an overview of where we are when it comes to funding or resources in the ASA region. Last 3 years, we've seen the resources being almost divided, like 40% coming from domestic governments, around 25 to 30 and sometimes 35% coming from the private health providers, and 25% from donor funding. However, donor funding remains more visible in some areas, in some countries, specifically, for example, in HIV in Eastern Africa. So the visibility of donor funding is more, although their contribution has remained stagnant, more or less, it's slightly declining, but that's a very minor thing. External support has peaked off, as I'm saying, especially for HIV, and it's either in many countries leveling or in some countries slightly going down. Having said that, my first disruptive question is, when we start talking of resources, do we know what are we talking about? None of the country knows to account for all SRHR parameters. None of the country. WHO stipulates that there should be around 207 reproductive health observations. But most of the NHAs, which is the National Health Accounting System, and other accounting system, including NASA for HIV, they only take care of 92, which is the 44% of these parameters. In ASA, 4 countries have reported no reproductive health data, 15 have reported under 50%, and stakeholders, conventions, and discussions like this, when we are talking of a dynamic nature of the world, cannot be based on static data of accounting that we have now. So that's the first major thing. We don't know what we are talking about because we have not advocated for that. And unless we know what we are talking about, how can we approach anybody saying, oh, we need more resources? So that's my first question. In terms of coming to opportunities, we have opportunities like GFF, which has committed 2.5 billion, and there are new pledges from donors. So that's an opportunity. In a period of uncertain ODA, it's imperative that countries make use of the mandate-aligned and catalytic GFF grants and concessional IDA for effective SRH investments. All 11 GFF countries in our region have secured at least one GFF grant since 2013. $490 million linked with 3.4 billion of IDA disbursement, which is 7 times of the grant. So this is an opportunity. Second opportunity is gender equality and the renewed focus on gender issues globally. Almost all donors and UN are converging or are focusing on gender, and that provides SRH an excellent entry point to leverage that and ensure more resources. The third is UHC. SRHR and UHC, you would see many of your countries, there are discussions around financing UHC. In Botswana, there is a discussion around sustainable financing for health. So all the countries are having some, or so are we positioned to ensure that whatever gaps we are identifying here, whether it is male engagement or whether it's anything else, are adequately addressed there. Now let's talk about for 1 minute about what is the reality or ground. We are continuously talking of, oh, domestic government investment should increase. We are sitting in the real world. How many of our countries are struggling not with debt? Isn't debt repayment, just forget about the principal, only the interest repayment is a challenge for half of the countries in ASA region? If governments are really struggling to even repay their loans, how can they, unless we put our force, our strength behind them to advocate for restructuring of these debts, how can they continue, how can we continue demanding them when they are themselves debt ridden? Oh, you increase your funding, you increase your funding, you increase your funding. It doesn't work like that. This is not realistic. So are we doing enough to support our governments to get out of this debt trap? So that's one. Second is, and again, some of these are very disruptive, I know, but I'm being intentionally here. Are we not working in silos? If we work together, if we leverage integration together, if we leverage collaboration rather than competition, and this I'm talking of not just one sector. I'm talking not just for civil society where there are issues with double dipping, etc. I'm also talking of the tendency of UN and various bilaterals to develop their own vertical silos. Every country is suffering from it because you will have X donor funding a project and that remains outside the national system, and that will have very high cost norms. You will have another donor wanting to do the similar things or similar sounding things, but in another silo. And many national coordinating authorities would not even know of these parallel funding streams. So unless we collaborate rather than compete, unless we keep the national interest as supreme, as something where we all are converging to and we are not hesitant in sharing data and information, we will continue coming in every meeting and discussing the same thing. Donors have responsibility because donors do not give us enough predictability of funding. Various CSOs, whether networks, I've seen them struggling, including governments, that what will happen in the next PEPFAR COP, what will happen in the next global fund cycle, whether this donor will continue or not. So unless donors provide some kind of a predictability, this is a huge inefficiency built in the system because every time you are planning only for 2 years. You are neither investing from the long-term vision. So it's a shared responsibility to make sure that sustainability is inherent, is inbuilt in all our programs. And a couple of last points. First, and one of them is that are we making enough case for good investment? Do we have return on investments or cost of inaction documented that if you will not do this, this is what the cost will be? And our own accounting systems, our own costing systems vary hugely. In ASA region, there is 300 to 400% variation. So for example, if you are going from here to Westland and if you are paying $1 for the same ride, another provider is in other country is providing you for $4. So this is the variation in programming when it comes to MSM, sex worker, AGYW. And we have all seen the result of what happens when the costs are inflated like this. Dreams is an excellent example. All the countries were trying to build in everything under the name of Dreams project, including legal awareness, vocational skills, this, that, and what has happened? Suddenly, the support for Dreams has come down because we take donor money to run these boutique, all-inclusive and very expensive programs which cannot be scaled up or cannot be taken by government. So let us agree that we will do our best to bring the cost norms to a level where they can be at par with what government can take over. I'm giving you a couple of very easy examples. In a country, there was a project called Avahan. Because it brought down gradually the cost norm from 3 times what government was offering to the level what government could afford, they could sustain their gains. And lastly, I don't see, in such forums, if we are talking of resources and we are using them as a means to mobilize resources, we should have private sector in the room. That's the biggest source of funding emerging forward. In a country which is really struggling with debt trap, we should be looking at innovative sources of financing. We should have, and CSOs should also start thinking of at least having benchmarks of this year I'll bring 20% of my total resources from from private sector. Next year I'll increase it to 30% or 25%. So there should be, I think, a target of resource mobilization. And lastly, my point is leverage technology, leverage innovation, whether it is not just technology, whether it is task shifting, whether it is integration, whether it is making your services more accessible, because a lot of inefficiency which are built in our service delivery in the name of, oh, we are civil society organizations, we do our small projects. So we have to come out of those shells and remove those inefficiencies, because as you said, in the African proverb, that should probably also be added, that we join hands and then the economy of scale pick up. The economy of scale will only kick in if you join hands. If you keep working in your silos, that's not the most efficient way of working. So we have to get over that. So, and lastly, to the young people in the room, are we challenging the status quo enough? Isn't our language more just getting into the jargons of the existing systems? So I would request the young people to start challenging us more, start showing us the way and telling us what new can be done. You've seen things that have worked, because for every year we come back and we probably have the same questions. So we stand to be guided, I think, by the young people, their energy and their zeal to innovate and to push the boundaries, because we need to innovate, we need to think out of the box, and that's where we look up to the young people's voices. Thank you very much. And sorry, maybe I was a bit too direct. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alanka. I am really happy that I'm here today, because I feel challenged as well, and I'm really quite excited for the nuggets that you've shared with us, and you know, just stimulating the ways in which we think about how do we do our programs, how do we raise resources for our programs. Are we focusing on sustainable financing? Why are we working in silos? How can we stop working in silos? Challenging our young people. You are the leaders today, not tomorrow. You are the leaders today. You will have to pull up your sleeves and get into the trenches and make sure that this world works for us together. Thank you so much, Alanka, and I really want to thank all my panelists today. They've really brought some really interesting nuggets, and I'm hoping that the questions that are going to come from the audience are going to be just as exciting. I think we will take, maybe, because our time is very limited, so we'll take 2 rounds of questions, 3 at a time. I see a hand that is raised right at the back there. I don't know if there is a mic that side. Is there anyone who's helping us with the mic?
Hello, everybody. Oh, gosh. It's Yumna Hattis from Frontline AIDS. I just want to commend the panel. I think what you've been speaking about this morning is essential in moving forward. I think it's something that's not necessarily new, but I think it's the right timing, because with the anti-rights movement growing and describing themselves as a tsunami coming, I think in particular what Alankar was saying about working in silos, the opposition has a way of modus operandi, and it is divide and conquer. And we've been falling prey to that because we work in silos and because we are competing with one another. So we move away from an intersectional approach because we want to go with where the money is. But I think before we even think about the money, just remember, if we are getting a lot of funding from the US in particular, if that money goes away when Trump comes, what are you going to do? What are we going to do? And what Alankar is saying to us is we need to start thinking beyond the corruption that we have in all our countries. We need to start thinking, how can we bring everybody on board to deal with our issues? Stop depending on foreign aid.
Good morning, my name is Faith Nashipai. I'm from Kenya, Karibuni, Kenya. I was not there yesterday. My comment or question, I have two comments. One is on funding. And I believe that if we were to look at our approaches from a sustainable point and really ask ourselves, when I am rolling out a program, what is the sustainability approach of this from a social component? We are going to achieve more. And we won't be having a lot of issues with looking for donor funding. We'll actually treat donor funding as seed funds for our programming. Then that way we are able now to identify resources within our countries so that we can have our work moving forward beyond the seed fund that we get. I have a question for Malvia. I had you mention about SRHR, and you mentioned something around adolescent girls and young women. Yes, I understand, and we all understand in this room that the many challenges that are faced in our young people are more to the young girl than to the boy. However, the ABMs, or the adolescent boys and men, this is becoming a big discussion from a South to South Learning Network, which I am actually a national champion here in Kenya. It is also becoming a major approach, an agenda transformative approach, not just in Africa, but globally. How then do we incorporate this in our work moving forward? Because yes, much as we've been doing adolescent young girls and women, we now need to incorporate. I'm not saying we stop, but we also incorporate ABYMs. Thank you.
Thank you to the panelists. I am Mary Ann Nkechi Obiaboso from the Center for Human Rights, University of Pretoria. I was supposed to give a keynote address on emerging issues in SRHR in Africa, but now I have to just make it as a comment. Over the decades, over the years, we've been discussing issues around sexual and reproductive health and rights, and most focus has been on teenage pregnancy, child marriage, FGM, but there are issues out there that affect a lot of people, most especially women and girls. And most of us are not talking about these issues. First is assisted reproduction. What are we doing in this area to support the surrogate mothers? What are we doing to support the commissioning parents? Because we've seen cases where the surrogate mother goes into this contract with the commissioning parents, and in the course of the whole thing, the commissioning parent back out, leaving the surrogate mother with the baby she never planned to have. And even for the donors, what is the plan? What are we doing to ensure that there are policies out there to protect this set of people? Also, we have issues around obstetric violence. Many women experience obstetric violence in healthcare facilities during pregnancy and immediately after childbirth. And this has, in most cases, contributed to the high rate of postpartum depression that women are experiencing today. We need to start talking about all of these issues. What about self-managed abortion? In Africa, in most African countries, our laws prohibit abortion, while some restrict it. For instance, in Nigeria, abortion is only permitted where it is carried out to save the mother's life. So if the mother's life is not in danger, then you cannot go to any healthcare facility to procure abortion. How do we ensure that women enjoy the exercise of their sexual and reproductive health and rights by having access to necessary medications without falling into the trap of legal laws in their various countries? So we need to start talking about these emerging issues around sexual and reproductive health and rights. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll give my panelists a few minutes to answer, to respond to those questions, but because we're running out of time, they will respond, and then we can be able to just take two more, and then in their response, they'll also give their closing remarks. So to my panelists, I think, Alanka, there was a question for you.
Thank you. And to the first colleague in the room and behind there, I can't agree more, and this is precisely what I say, that we need to collaborate rather than compete, because if we remain splintered, if we remain like this, it will be easy for any counter movement to just demolish us. So I can't agree with you. You said better than me. Probably I could have just borrowed your word in my next session. On the sustainability from a Kenya colleague, yes, very few projects look at sustainability from the beginning, and that's a problem, because, and that's again, you know, this competition for funding, and all of us are equally to be blamed, and I'm not excluding UN, I'm not excluding multilaterals or bilateral partners. We tend to try and, you know, influence CSOs, encouraging them to pitch in a particular way, and for many of the donors also, sustainability is a tick box till the day of pulling back stares on their face. So I fully agree that we should have, one of the ways doing this is that if for the SRHR, and I'm borrowing some of the concepts from the HIV which have really worked efficiently, is this network system. If we have a recognized, embedded national network, at least the competition can be curtailed, and there could be some code of conduct, some harmonized cost norms which are more agreeable. I can give you an example. Botswana is coming up with its new strategy. When you were talking of men and boys, I think most of the national strategies would speak about men and boys engagement, but the implementation part was missing. And that's where the problem is, because most of the money was coming to adolescent girls and young women. So that programming swelled. At that time, programmers should have influenced the decision that just the way we talk, for example, of sex worker, I'm not drawing a parallel, I'm saying when we talk of sex worker programming, we always include clients. So when we know that the source of infection for the young girls is coming from men, from sugar daddies, from transactional sex and all that, how can we program for this unless we address the source of the virus? So I think this holistic approach has made, I think, more got momentum in last few years, and I can say definitely that, for example, how cost norms can be reduced, and my national coordinator for NAPA is here for Botswana. We were discussing yesterday about the Nano Hang campaign which you saw. So we brought down, through building synergies, leveraging private sector, the cost of one day total session of Nano Hang to $700, $800, which has 300 people coming, all their arrangements. So I think these cost norm is the biggest problem. Unless we start looking at cost norm which are sustainable, it's a problem. So I think we need to get this nationalized in that way. Thank you.
So we'll just take 2 more questions and then we can close.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm Flavia Chomkama. I'm from Uganda, and I want to thank you for discussing the issue of financing, and it's an area that we need really to put our hands to and our hearts to, really. I was just looking at the issue of out-of-pocket expenditure, which is catastrophic. For Uganda's case, we are about, in the last years, around 2022, it's about 41%. And, you know, of course, we are not aggregating all the investments in education and health, but we are looking at, if you are looking at health in Uganda, it's catastrophic. And we are, like Winnie says, the ED of UNAIDS, that we are just a disease away from poverty. And so I think you are saying that right and hard things we need to agree upon, that we need to have efficiencies. And at our country, we have initiated the process of training members of parliament, councillors, and communities to do budget tracking and monitoring, because we have lots of money is being invested, but nobody knows where the money is going and how it is being spent. And the technical teams hide monies in welfare, entertainment, in consultancies. So we need to efficiently follow this money where it is going, and in this we are doing what we call the community-led HIV and health financing premier beyond 2030. We can't continue to see the money being wasted, and yet we have flatline funding. And so we are looking at to see how communities can actually monitor on donors all this time. If you give us a computer, you give us a motorcycle, you give us a filing cabinet, you give us a water dispenser, please. I think these are things we need to start talking about. We cannot talk about cooperative agreements that strengthen us in the short term and then carry all the things they had invested in us back. And we need to also ensure that we have standards for implementing. We have across the array budgets, and everyone is having their own threshold. In one place, transport is 20,000, in another place it is 100,000. And even for donors, your expatriates are paid more than the local partners who are doing similar and even sometimes more work than you are doing. Is it possible for us to see how to be more equitable in resourcing and financing and mobilizing people? But finally, the issue of PHC, community system strengthening. The facilities can work, but we have seen they are failing, especially for HIV. And that's why we are saying invest in communities directly, because when you are gone with your money, with your big NGOs, communities remain with their information, remain with their skills. And we would like to see more monies channeled to the community homegrown organizations, not internationals that come and register as locals, because they are taking away opportunities and they don't even build so much the capacity of locals because they are feeling threatened. And the issue of competition needs to be, you know, if you come as an implementing partner, you claim to facilitate and build and support groups in that community. Please do that, and let's see in 5 years, as you wind up, we see a community organization whose capacity has been built, spending less for the same work you are doing, so that we enhance efficiencies and enhance effectiveness. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I wish to firstly applaud the panelists for sharing the insightful presentations. My names are Lerato Caroline Khutlang. I'm an admitted advocate of the Court of Law in Lesotho, working for Sonke Gender Justice. I have 3 questions for Alanka. How can we, as African youth, collaboratively support our countries to settle their debts? Secondly, how can we, as African youth, collaboratively hold our leaders accountable for misusing the funds? And lastly, how can we, as African youth, collaboratively curb donor dependency? Thank you.
I think they just to you like
I don't think we have too much time left, so very, very quickly, to my sister from Uganda, absolutely 100% agree with whatever you said on a stamp paper, with my heart. I mean, you've rightly pointed out that community system is strengthening, and whenever there is capacity building, it should be permanent. It should not be on a loan basis. So the capacities should be imparted with true intention of actually capacitating civil society or government. Because at the end of the day, for any response, there will be no donor left. It will be only your government and your communities. So here I'm just quoting the Vice President of Botswana, who said that unless we build the capacity of communities, when we were discussing sustainability roadmap, there will be no sustainability. So the sustainability will only come through empowering communities, and I fully agree this of renaming NGOs from INGO to a ex-NGO Botswana, ex-NGO South Africa, ex-NGO Namibia, Uganda. I fully agree. Indigenous CSOs face challenges, but that is part of the process. That should not at all discourage them from trying to trying to expand. So that's where. On the question about what young people can do, number one, please, I mean, I'll start from your from the bottom question of the last one that you had, because how do you hold them accountable for donor dependence is to ensure transparency in their accounting. If the tendering process, if the procurement process, if the government spending is transparent, globally it has been proven that it brings down corruption. Globally, it's not a secret thing. Young people can hold countries or challenge them to transparently declare either on a, if there is a road getting constructed, on a board that the cost of construction of this road is so, this has been awarded to this person, and this simple thing has resulted in the specification that it has to be 6-inch deep, because these are the types of corruption that we are talking about. If more and more e-governance can kick in, the young people are best to use their influencing power to hold government to account that every tender, every procurement document should be in public view. That's another way of challenging government and bringing the transparency, because transparency is the antidote to corruption, bottom line. So, and that's where what we can do. So that's number one. Number two is holding them to account or making or lessening the donor dependence. Donor dependence will not go off in one day. It's a long journey, it's a tough journey we all have to embrace. There are countries which decided, and they were not rich at that time, to ask donors to leave because they wanted to be independent. They wanted to reduce donor dependence. This is a tough decision, but some countries have said that we thank you, but no thank you, we'll survive with our own resources. So that boldness will only come if the voter who holds the key to the governments would challenge, would push for it. And lastly, how can you support on debt restructuring? You can add your voice, because you have a very strong voice. Many of young people are influencers. How many influencers who are working on social causes ever talk of debt restructuring? How many of them say that, okay, we are ready to march with you to X country embassy and hand over a memorandum saying we want our country debt to be restructured so it can invest in health or in education, in social welfare. So we can, you all have donors. Donors are not like invisible. They all are around us. How can you join hand with World Bank and IMF when the Future Summit happens to suggest collectively as entire ASA Young Brigade that we want debt restructuring or at least some concessions, but the government and the fine print there should be that government should ensure and commit that they will not use again to divert to those less meaningful expenses. So hold your government that we are joining hand with you to get you debt concessions, but you promise us that you will invest this in health, in education, in this and that, where you want them. So transparency, your own advocacy, your outreach using social media and influencing and using media and partnerships with development partners to go and build pressure. That's the only way. I think there is no one fine bullet solution which can be done in one day. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alanka. I'll just ask my panelists 30 seconds or less closing remarks, and we can close the session.
Thank you so much, colleagues. I think I agree with you that corruption is and the issues of ethical leaderships are very important. So we need to look into those issues in terms of determinants of health. And also I want to say that in terms of the collaborations, there is a gender transformation for Africa, which has been implemented in 7 African countries. There are 7 implementation research there that have shown that there are results, positive results when you engage men and boys when we deal with issues of SRHR. And also in terms of the issues of capacity strengthening, I agree with my colleagues here that they are very important. We need to invest in our community, CBOs community, so that they can be able to do the projects because they know the community better than us. Thanks.
Thank you very much. 30 seconds is a difficult one, but just to say that I like the conversation that has happened around funding, and to just challenge all of us, the recipients of fund and the givers of funding, to start thinking about what Alanka alluded to say that there are these frameworks that make it difficult for CSOs that are seeking funding to think about sustainability, to think cross-sectionally, to think about intersectionality, because the funding, the calls themselves, they come very siloed. So how can we, as recipients of funding, and also an accountability on the end of the givers of funding, to also be intersectional in the way we frame calls and the way we do development? Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. I think the conversation, I was actually saying we don't have much time because it was really getting heated. And thank you for the comments, especially again, sustainability funding. I think even as we come up with programs in country, in the 24 countries that we work in, I think the issue of sustainability, what happens if the donors pull out? Do we continue implementing? Do men engage still? Will it exist in case we lose any of our funding streams? So we've already started thinking about it as men engage, but also even the conversation about tapping into corporates, because they have money, but normally would look at bigger donors. So thank you for those comments, and hoping that we'll continue with this conversation.
Yes, echoing to the International Youth Day themes of yesterday, saying that from creeks to progress, use digital pathway for sustainable development, and echoing to what Alanka said earlier, that as young people we need to just be at the forefront, showing the way where we want to shape the future, and we are the leader of the day, not tomorrow. I'll call upon everyone in the room to work with young people, not as the recipient of the services or whatever, but as the programmers, that they sit on the table, they do design, they implement. They have also that capacity to just hold accountable to the government and so whatever, because it cannot happen if we are left out alone and they have been called to attend these platforms as only young people to just give out our experiences without being a actual implement of the program on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been inspired, we've been challenged, we've been motivated, we've been stimulated. Let's continue the conversations. A round of applause to our stellar panel. Thank you so much, and let's continue the conversation.
We invited some of the partners who were implementing work around section of industrial health and rights to submit abstracts, and we will now use the next 40 so minutes to present some of the abstracts. And let me invite Diana Macaulay, co-unit manager at Sonke Gender Justice, to take us through the abstracts.
Thank you very much, Jude. Distinguished guests, and I am addressing each and every one of us in this room. It's a pleasure to facilitate the next session, which is on abstract presentation. I just want to give a very quick background. We were interested in receiving abstracts that give us understanding and give us the opportunity to share best practices on SRHR implementation in our different jurisdictions. We received 60. 14 was shortlisted for oral presentations, and 10 were shortlisted for poster presentations. Of those 10, only 2 are here physically, but we just want to invite all of you to like and share our YouTube, and also just to let you know that the other presentations will be presented through our live TV show that's happening at the terrace. We don't have much time, so I will call upon Colleen Wagner. Please, Colleen, come through. Colleen submitted on employing a community clinical approach to advancing SRHR and mitigate HIV transmission in age-disparate relationships with men in South Africa. Colleen, you have 3 minutes. You have 3 minutes, and please, at the end of our presentations, we will just raise hands. I'll ask whether there are any questions for the first presenter, and we'll pick 2. We're just trying to catch up on time. Thank you. Who's controller for the slides? Are we good? Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Colleen Wagner from an organization called NACOSA in Cape Town. I had 5 minutes initially, so I'm going to run through these. Next slide, please. So we started out, our project was employing a community clinical approach to advance SRH research with men in South Africa. So you can just keep going on this slide. So the program is called My Journey. It's an adolescent young people program. And part of the program we do is have a section for males 25 to 40. And this is usually the male sexual partners of our adolescents. Next slide. And so we implemented this program, and what it looks like is, so we'll receive males at different entry points in the program. We invite them, enroll them, and they'll do a dialogue, or if they want to, join the dialogues. And the whole point of dialogues and all the services we do is so that we can offer these core services, which is HIV testing, HIV self-screening, health screening, and all of the other screenings. And then if they're positive, we'll refer them for ART or initiate. And if they are negative, we'll initiate them on PrEP, and then obviously refer onwards if needed. Next slide, please. And so the aim of the intervention was to customize programs to engage men and mitigate HIV transmission through these age-disparate relationships, to comprehend their views, to collaboratively develop interventions tailored to their requirements, and ultimately the uptake of SRH services by males. Next slide. Sorry for running. Okay, then so these are the 2 services that we offered. So there was cross-referral between our community team and our clinical team. So our community team would do mapping of the area, determining where hotspots are, engaging with employers or workplaces in the community. We do demand creation events, we do health services. With the clinical team, we've got mobile buses, and so these mobile vans will go around to the community, and they will, like I say, fully fitted mobile units at workplaces, so the males then don't have to take off work. Services will be brought to them, and then we initiate on ART and all the other health services. We also found one of the things we did was to incentivize services. For example, we want to do HIV testing, so we gave haircuts, and we've got a little video that they'll play later. And so we would try and just have a session with guys here. Next slide, please. And so our findings, between April 22 to March 24, we saw 20 23,000 males in that period. And of these males, and so all of them were screened for HIV, TB, STIs, etc. Of those who tested negative, 10% were initiated on PrEP, and of those who tested who was reactive, 79% of them were initiated on ART. And so our conclusion was that this community clinical approach directly contributed to improved health outcomes of men, with an increased uptake of HIV services and treatment, and more work needed to be done in the gender transformative approach with MSP. There's just one other slide. Next slide. Next one. Yes. So these are just some of the guys. So this is the last one I want to speak. The last one I wanted to speak about. The next one, sorry, yes, this one. So as Dr. Anam says, we're working on a project with UWC School of Public Health, with NACOSA, and with an organization called Hope Africa. And we're implementing this gender transformation approach. We are 7 countries implementing this project. And so West, East, and South Africa, with the aim of, so for South Africa, we focused on what are we learning about what it takes to use gender transformative approaches into our work with men and boys. And so we're implementing a learning partnership on, so it's called GT for Africa, Gender Transformation for Africa, and it's aimed at a sexual, reproductive, and maternal research collaborative approach with these 7 countries. I am done. Thank you so much. Last slide. There's just the thank you slide after this. Thank you.
Record 3 minutes. Thank you very much. Would be interesting to know what the status on compliance and adherence is based on this model, but great implementation and linkage between community and clinical access. I'll call upon Bala Balikis. I hope I haven't murdered your name, but thank you for your submission, which was accelerating efforts towards enhancing SRHR and gender equality in Kano State, Nigeria. Bala, are you here? Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bala Balikis. I'm a passionate advocate for youth empowerment and sustainable development. As a development practitioner, I've dedicated my life to creating positive change in my community. Growing up in Nigeria, I saw firsthand the challenges faced by girls, young people, in accessing education, healthcare, and other opportunities. This experience has actually fueled my passion to make a difference. So today I would share our work on sexual and reproductive health that we do in Yes Foundation for Sustainable Development, which is a youth-led organization, by the way, towards accelerating efforts to enhance sexual and reproductive health and gender equality in Kano State, Nigeria. Next slide, please. Okay, so Kano State has a population of approximately 20 million people, of which the female population is around 49 to 50%, meaning that there are about 9.8 million to 10 million females in Kano State. Yet, some of these women and girls still do not have the freedom to make informed choices about, their body, as well as access sexual and reproductive health services. Next slide, please. So let's look at what data says about SRHR in this region. So maternal mortality rate is estimated to be around 1,025 per 100,000 deaths in northern Nigeria. And this figure is significantly higher than the national average. So this shows that there's actually a lot of challenge when it comes to accessing quality healthcare services. Another indicator, teenage pregnancy rate. About 23% of girls aged 15 to 19 have begun childbearing, and this can be attributed to the prevalence of child marriage and early marriage in northern Nigeria. We also have unmet needs for family planning. This can be attributed to the culture of shame and taboo. We know Nigeria to be very religious and cultural, so these are some of the things contributing to the unmet needs for family planning. We also have female genital mutilation. Although the prevalence is lower in northern Nigeria compared to the south, but it still occurs, and there's still a lot of silence around it. Next slide, please. Okay. So in implementing our project, we identified some challenges. We found out that there's a high demand of sexual and reproductive health services, but the cultural and religious barriers still limit, women's autonomy. We also found that early marriage and teenage pregnancy are critical issues in northern Nigeria. The low levels of gender equality, also due to religious and cultural norms. There's also limited data availability when it comes to sexual and reproductive health, and we have to rely on personal experiences and anecdotal accounts. Also, there are less targeted interventions tailored towards improving maternal health and family planning access in northern Nigeria. So our goal for the project was basically to accelerate efforts towards enhancing sexual and reproductive health and gender equality in that region. Next slide, please. So the approach that we employed was a mixed method approach. So we did capacity building for relevant stakeholders. We organized advocacy campaigns. We did policy review as well as community engagement. Next slide, please. What we found out based on our interventions and engagements was that there's a need for evidence-based approach so that we can have data that we can rely on that can inform our interventions, and also a need to continuously monitor and evaluate those interventions. We also learned that there's increased awareness and demand for sexual and reproductive health, like I mentioned earlier, but the issue of culture and religion still limits this access to these services. We also have community resistance and cultural barriers. These are significant barriers to accessing sexual and reproductive health due to cultural and religious norms, and these barriers are particularly strong in rural areas and among older generations. So there's a need for strategic, multi-level stakeholders engagement. We also found that it's important to engage young people, particularly through education and community outreaches, and this has shown promise in our project, and it has helped to address some of the issues around teenage pregnancy and unmet needs for family planning. Next slide. So through our project, which is on accelerating effort towards enhancing sexual and reproductive health, we're able to increase community ownership towards increasing access to sexual and reproductive health in 5 communities: Warawa, Kabuga, Sharada, Sakura, and Kura communities in Kano State. We found that some of these communities are now beginning to invest in the area of infrastructural development, community-owned, community-led. Most of these communities are beginning to donate medical equipment towards sexual and reproductive health services, and they also have a functional community feedback. There's a platform called the PHC Accountability Tracker, through which community members are able to share their PhD needs. They're able to also share their experiences when they go to these health services, and that has significantly improved sexual and reproductive health in these communities. Part of the impacts that we also recorded was improved attitude of these communities towards gender equality. Like I mentioned earlier, when it comes to gender equality, this is a particularly sensitive topic in Nigeria, and it's not something that you can achieve in a day, but we are making progress in this regard. And we saw that in 2 of our communities where we implemented this project, as the WDCs, the World Development Committees, now have subcommittees that are headed by women. So it's beginning to show that they're allowing women also take up spaces and, do some of these things to improve health in the community. Another impact that we recorded was increased awareness. So we trained over 100 female champions and male motivators in these communities, who are now serving as advocates and champions for sexual and reproductive health and gender equality. Another impact that we recorded was advocacy visits to stakeholders. We engaged them in all of our projects, and we're beginning to see, their acceptance and buy-in in some of these areas. Next slide. So the next steps to scale up the project and no, the previous one, please. Thank you. So to scale up the project and sustain impact, one of the ways we can do that is through strengthening partnerships and collaborations. As you can see here, this is a community engagement that we did, a town hall meeting in a community called Wawa, where we engaged community members on issues around sexual and reproductive health. So strengthening partnerships is very, very key. Next slide. Another thing that we intend to do to scale up the project is to continue to engage men and boys in the discussion. Like some of the speakers said earlier, they are very critical in this aspect and they are our partners in progress. So when men are coming on board to advocate against issues affecting women, they're making a statement and we would have a way forward. Next slide. Another aspect of it, scaling up the project, is expanding community outreaches, like we said earlier. Engaging male motivators, key opinion leaders in communities on the issue of sexual and reproductive health. Next slide. Other things we can do or that we plan to do to scale up the project includes continuous adaptation and refinement of these interventions based on the lessons that we've learned, which I mentioned earlier. Another thing we need to do is continuous advocacy, not just at the community level, but also policy advocacy. As we know, Kano State is one of the states in northern Nigeria that are not so quick to implement or to assent to certain laws. And I think this is also around the issue of religion and culture. And so continuous advocacy is one of the things that we intend to do to change that. Evidence-based. Like I mentioned earlier, we have limited data around sexual and reproductive health, and we know the importance of data is to help inform interventions. So this is something that we also propose to do going forward. Next slide. So in conclusion, our innovative approach has shown promise so far, but there is need for continuous collaboration in order to accelerate effort towards enhancing sexual and reproductive health and gender equality in Kano State. Next slide. So these are our references. Next slide. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Bala. Indeed, social accountability mechanisms, and indeed I would say that the saving grace here is on the community ownership. That definitely is the engine for driving the change. And of course, we are hoping to see more of the youth faces in this process. I'll call upon Mpo Masimong. Mpo has submitted on unmuting and amplifying echoes of adolescent girls and young women. Mpo, are you here?
Good morning, everyone, and all protocol observed. My name is Mpo Masimong from Lesotho She Hive Association, and I have submitted an abstract on one of our programs named Yes, the program Unmuting and Amplifying Echoes of Adolescent Girls and Young Women. This program was designed to empower adolescent girls and young women to be at the forefront of the issues that affect them. It also capacitates them to make informed decisions while also being part of in decision-making platforms, participating fully. Due to the background of our society in Lesotho, it is a very patriarchal society where stigma affects adolescent girls and young women a lot. Their voices are not usually heard, and they are not given an opportunity to participate fully in any decision-making platforms. Men are raised to believe that they are supposed they are raised to believe that they are the only ones that are supposed to make decisions for women, even on issues that affect them. The statistics show that 86% of women and 40% of men in Lesotho have experienced some form of violence. This is according to the report of Gender Links 2015. Can I have the next slide, please? Due to their vulnerability, we see lack of action taken when AGYW take spaces or raise their opinions in any decision-making platforms. Their voices are not considered at all. And some of the issues that we see is that this leads to high unintended pregnancies and unsafe abortion, especially to poorer and unmarried women. The implementation of our practice, we firstly created safe spaces where AGYW spoke out about the challenges they are facing throughout their communities, and we also created joint consultations or dialogue with experts or stakeholders such as the police, the village chiefs, and the health providers. We engage them also in activities of awareness that promote the realization of their rights. Some of the topics I found very imperative to include during some of our capacity buildings were assertiveness and self-confidence. This is because if you grow up in a society where your voices are not heard or considered as a woman, you do not have the confidence to actually stand up in front of people so that they can hear you or your opinion. So if you are empowered and you are assertive, you are willing to learn from people while also raising your opinions, you are able to make constructive arguments and not just speak for the sake of speaking or for just participating. Next slide, please. Ultimately, some of our outcomes from the program is that 2 of our empowered adolescent girls and young women participated in the sittings of the village chiefs. These are a very high-level meetings in our country where the village chiefs meet to present some of the issues they are facing or the groundwork they are doing to the principal chief. So women and girls don't usually attend the sittings or these meetings. So it was really a privilege for these 2 adolescent girls and young women to actually go there and be in front of them and address them on issues that they are facing, particularly when it comes to their participation in the meetings in their communities. Okay. It's fine, I'll look here. Okay. And during their presentation or their initiative to actually address the community leaders, we got a really positive feedback from some of the village chiefs that were there. They were really impressed and applauded the adolescent girls and young women for being courageous enough to face them and actually tell them that they have been violating them by not actually considering their voices in community gatherings, because the spaces in Lesotho, you find out that men usually attend these gatherings. Only women just go there to listen and just be given instructions. So for them being there and actually voicing their opinions, and especially in front of the community leaders, it was really something that was really good. For concluding, I found it very imperative for us to support the adolescent girls and young women, and to actually continue to empower them, because they do have immense potential to advocate for themselves if they are given the right guidance and opportunity. And there is really a need for continued engagement in activities that promote their rights and policy influence. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having adolescent girls and young women capacitated so that their voices are raised and they can be in the right spaces to push their own agendas. That's the way to go. I'll call upon Anastasia Munyati. Anna, endesha mwaiche wandi.
Good morning. My name is Anastasia. I'm from Lusaka, Zambia. I work for an organization called Arise for Social and Gender Justice. So for this project, part of it came from a research that we did as an organization in 2020. And we discovered that in Zambia, young people, adolescent girls, boys and men, are not accessing services in reproductive health. So what we discovered was that whilst there are so many interventions that are going on in the country, our research showed that access to information and services, especially among young people, was very limited. So when we had the opportunity to do this project with funding from Sonke Gender Justice, we decided to see how we could engage men and boys and see what role men and boys have to play in reproductive health rights. So, next slide, please. As an organization, our main goals really go towards increasing and improving access for women and girls towards reproductive health rights, and then also we deal with advocacy issues and improving social and economic outcomes for women and girls. Next slide. We work in those thematic areas that include menstrual hygiene health for young women and girls, climate justice, and advocacy. Next slide. So for this particular project, our context was addressing sexual and reproductive health rights issues among men and boys in Lusaka. We realized that it was important for men and boys to be engaged in this because they play a critical role in reproductive health rights, and that their involvement can drive change in attitudes and behaviors. So our objectives was to promote access to sexual and reproductive health rights information and services for men and boys, challenge and change harmful social and cultural norms, and reduce stigma related to contraception and HIV and AIDS. It was very exciting yesterday to see how, for the first time, we are incorporating HIV and AIDS in reproductive health rights. The funny thing is, as an organization, we have been doing this for the last 3 years. So we have seen how reproductive health rights and HIV AIDS, when incorporated, we can achieve so much if we include these conversations in one. So our target groups was adolescent boys, men, faith leaders, and community stakeholders, which included schools, football coaches, and bar owners. So the question we're asking is, where are the men found? Where are the boys found? And in Zambia, we know that men are found in bars. Young boys are found playing soccer. We find men at in churches. So we had to incorporate faith leaders. Next. So our focus area was reproductive health, HIV/AIDS prevention, dealing with harmful cultural norms, and also raising awareness and promoting action regarding gender-based violence. We held workshops that included interactive sessions for young boys that are in school, We held dialogue meetings, and we trained community volunteers who were to play critical roles in disseminating information, facilitating workshops and conversations. So we trained a total of 14 males and 13 female facilitators. So we also engaged with CSOs to see how we can collaboratively meet the goals of our program. We incorporated a participatory approach and involved community members in designing, implementing, and evaluating the project. We conducted pre- and post surveys, and we also received qualitative data in terms of feedback sessions from participants in the program. We were able to reach a total of 445 adolescent boys and 71 men, including faith leaders. Our findings: we saw increased awareness and in understanding of sexual reproductive health rights issues among men and boys, improved knowledge and better awareness of harmful cultural norms and available sexual reproductive health services. So we created an information pack that was some sort of a directory to distribute to the boys and men for them to be able to access different services and where they would go for the different services that they needed to access. We also saw reduced stigma around contraception and HIV and AIDS, and greater confidence in terms of enhancing ability for men and boys to make informed decisions and respond to gender-based violence. We had cases of men who they didn't know that what they were doing was actually abuse because of the patriarchal systems that exist. Men thought that it was okay for them to have sex with their wives, even without the consent from their wives. So they then came out and said, I didn't know that I was actually sexually violating my wife. And some of them would respond and say, I used to actually beat up my wife before this, but after what I have learned, I realized that I was committing a crime and I'm not going to be doing that anymore. Among the conclusions, we discovered that the community-led approach effectively engaged local stakeholders and addressed specific community needs. Because we sort of contextualized the program, we were able to receive better engagement from the participants. Engaging men and boys in reproductive health rights is critical for comprehensive and sustainable change. So the sustainability aspect of it was giving power to the community members to be able to go out and conduct these trainings, workshops, and conversations amongst their community members. So even without funding, that knowledge that they have acquired, they can still use to continue having conversations with boys and their fellow men in their communities. We saw program ownership and sustainability in the communities. One of the football coaches, for example, moved to another province, and they reported that where they went with the new football players that they were training, they were able to continue disseminating this information to them. So next steps, program expansion, broaden SRHR education initiatives, partnerships. We believe that collaborating and partnership is key. So to strengthen ties with schools and healthcare facilities, and empowerment, continue to empower men and boys towards gender equality and combating violence against women and girls. So these are just some of the pictures. Sorry, back. So just some of the pictures from our different interventions. So boys, and then the trainings that we were having, and just men having conversations with each other, and then distributing sanitary towels to young women, girls in schools. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. Collaborative approach in tackling harmful cultural norms, and that has increased awareness and increased knowledge on harmful norms. I'll call upon Evelyn Joseph. Evelyn, are you here? Just wave. Where are you? Okay. As Evelyn walks up, Her submission was promoting and protecting the progressive realization of SRHR.
Good morning, colleagues. My name is Evelyn Choma Joseph, National Coordinator, Men Engage Nigeria. So today, my abstract is focused on promoting and protecting the progressive realization of sexual and reproductive health and rights in Enugu State, Nigeria. Okay, the project assessed the pressing challenge surrounding sexual and reproductive health and rights in the state, where reproductive health indices, though improving, still fall short of the desired level. This next slide. Okay, I won't bore us with this data because my colleague Bala provided almost the same introduction. So next slide. Okay, this is just a pictorial representation of our program. You can see our interaction with the youth. One of the slides, you'll see a condom demonstration for young boys, and also training with the law enforcement in responding to issues of SRHR and so on. Please, next slide. Okay, the justification for this project lies in the recognition of the profound impact that inadequate SRHR services have on individuals and communities. There is an increased risk of SRHR vulnerabilities and gender-based violence for young women and girls, adolescents, sexual minority group who additionally tend to have worse health outcomes, such as unsafe abortion, high maternal mortality, FGM, early and forced marriage, early and unintended childbearing, inadequate legal and policy framework, gender-based violence. Furthermore, limited awareness about SRHR rights perpetuate harmful gender inequalities, hindering efforts to achieve gender equality and social justice. Next slide, please. The project was implemented through a series of strategic actions designed to address significant SRHR challenges within the states by partnering and collaborating with other CSO organizations that also implement programs around SRHR, and also problem identification. Enugu State is a peculiar state where we have different diverse issues of SRHR. So we did problem identification to be able to strategically target our intervention. We also utilize targeted intervention by capacity buildings, community engagement, and policy advocacy. We provided capacity building to different targets populations that we dealt with in this project. We also use implementation strategies, social media campaigns, and challenges and adaptations. Throughout the project, we had issues of some challenges which we also find a way to strategize, to find a way to streamline that to work for us. Then also it targeted different target groups to improve their SRHR, which include 25 women and girls, 25 adolescents, 10 people with disabilities, 10 key populations, 15 law enforcement officials, 25 men and boys, and also 15 civil society organizations. By focusing on this group, the project created a comprehensive and inclusive approach by improving SRHR outcomes, addressing the needs and challenges of the most vulnerable and marginalized population in Enugu State. Just to give us a little bit understanding of our training with the law enforcement, in Enugu State we discovered that the data coming from the Ministry of Gender and Social Development on reported issues on gender-based violence was coming from the law enforcement office, and we discovered that there is lack of skill in terms of reporting, responding, and the treatment of survivors of gender-based violence. So we decided to improve the capacity or strengthen the capacity of the law enforcement officers in Enugu State to be able to have empathy, to respond and effectively report the issue of gender-based violence. And that gave us the project impacts we have in number 2, the reduction in reported cases of gender-based violence among women and girls in targeted communities as a result of the enhanced capacity building of the law enforcement and community engagement efforts. You can also see that there is an increase in awareness and access to SRH services due to the capacity building and engagement with the different target groups that we engaged with. There is also an empowerment through education and advocacy. Girls, boys, adolescents, we are empowered with SRHR education and advocacy skill, enabling them to make informed decisions about reproductive health and advocate for their rights within the community. You can also agree with me that sexual and reproductive health rights is the right for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Building capacity for better reporting of our enforcement staff. Betsalot Mengesha, your submission on Makeaway, Embracing Intersectionality for SRHR Equity in Ethiopia.
Good morning. I'm honored to speak today about, next slide please. I'm honored to speak today about a transformative initiative that is making a significant impact across 5 African countries, including our beloved Ethiopia. The Makeway project is an intersectionality-focused sexual reproductive health rights program funded by the Dutch government through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The project spans Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, and Zambia, addressing the complex need faced by the marginalized youth. Next slide. So in Ethiopia, the project is implemented by a consortium. BSO lead the consortium in partnership with IPAS Ethiopia, FAWE, and KORHA, along with 8 local CSOs. As you all know, SRH is a very broad. The Makeway Ethiopia mainly focus on SGBV and teenage pregnancy. Next. So these are our target groups: the marginalized youth with compounded vulnerabilities, such as university youth, youth with disability, young internally displaced people, high school youth, out-of-school youth, and female sex workers. And the indirect target groups are the CSO staffs and volunteers, community leaders, and religious leaders. Next slide. So the Makeway project employs an intersectionality approach to address the complex intersecting factors affecting the sexual reproductive health right of the marginalized youth. So by adopting this intersectional approach, we acknowledge the systematic discrimination faced by the individual based on their gender, race, economic status, disability, and other identities. So young girls in Ethiopia face significant barriers in accessing sexual and reproductive health care. This is due to poverty, stigma, and inaccessible health facilities. This leads to a severe lack of information and service. So the Makeway project aims to rectify this by empowering youth, strengthening the local CSOs, and advocating for an intersectional approach to SRHR. For example, through our advocacy, we were able to bring a positive change in Ethiopia in most of public health centers. The SRH service are given on the 3rd floor and above. So we were able to advocate and able to change the SRH service to the ground floor, which is accessible to everyone. So one of our key achievements in our project has reached more than 36,000 young people with compounded vulnerabilities, providing a critical SRH information and education. So notably, the 3,000 plus are from the women's from the National Association with Women, National Association of Women with Disabilities, and the remaining 33,000 are from young men and women from the IDP camps. So have benefited from our intervention. This was achieved through train-the-trainer model, where women with disability receive a specialized training and subsequently educate more than 3,000 community members, fostering a culture of inclusivity and understanding. So additionally, next slide. Thank you. Additionally, we have trained 42 healthcare providers in sign language to ensure that a person with hearing impairment receive a personalized and quality SRH information and service. So this initiative not only enhances the service delivery, but also strengthens the capacity of the local organization and youth leaders to advocate for a policy changes that reflect the diverse needs of our community. So the Make Way project also highlights the importance of, next slide please. So the Make Way project also highlights the importance of multi-stakeholder collaboration by engaging with the media, conduct a community outreach events, and fostering a partnership. We have created a powerful network driving to a sustainable change. So this collaboration has led to more inclusive policies and better access to SRH service for a youth with a compounded vulnerability. So our work is a testament to the power of intersectionality in addressing and understanding the unique challenges faced by the marginalized groups by focusing on the specific needs of the young people, particularly those with disabilities. We are building a more equitable and inclusive future. Thank you for your attention and support. Together we can continue to champion the rights and well-being of all young peoples, ensuring that there is no one left behind. Thank you.
Thank you, that's a lot. Interesting how we're fostering more inclusive and responsive environments to cater for intersectionalities even within SRHR. Lillian Mbuti, where are you? Mbuthi? I hope I haven't murdered your name. Lillian, are you here? Lillian Mbuti, please come through. Thank you. Lillian submitted on empowering adolescent girls and young women through planned community-led SRHR initiatives in Kenya.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I was just waiting for them to land on the correct slide. My name is Lillian Jerry Mbuthi, and I'm the country focal point in Kenya, Athena Network. I curated an abstract. Ideally, it's a proposed best practice. So this work hasn't been done yet, but ideally, it's a well-informed plan based on research backed by resources that are actually accredited. Now, my key points areas are the focus, which is ideally addressing this SRHR challenges for HOIW in rural Kenya. Yesterday when I was in the panel discussion, I mentioned the inadequate access to healthcare services, where my girls have shared their stories about walking miles and miles away up until they can be able to access at least a clinic. And the issues are limited access to reproductive health services and also the information bit of it based on cultural, economic, and geographical barriers. And our objectives is, include, improve SRHR outcomes and also promote gender equality through community-led initiatives. Again, yesterday when I was in the panel discussion, I mentioned we have a problem at the community level, from the faith leaders, the church leaders, the parents, the healthcare providers who aren't well trained to have youth-centered or youth-friendly services or approach. The implementation of the practice, we have the main activities coming up with the youth health committees, education sessions, which are very important in building the capacity of the community around, and also just conducting workshops from family planning, safe motherhood. I didn't include safe abortion on the slides, but it's actually part of it. And gender equality. We also have the mobile health clinics, just to bridge the gap up between the distance from their homes and also the healthcare or the health service they are seeking. We also have training health workers to avoid, or rather to stop, healthcare providers who are giving us the awkward look whenever we are approaching them in sexual matters. And the proposed timeline, this is just a rough overview of what it may look like, ideally January to December of next year. And the locations are very, very specific, from Bungoma, Busia, and Kakamega, western part of Kenya. The reason why I included those 3 counties in the western part of Kenya is that up until now, in this day, age, time, and era of 2024, we still have communities in that part of the country where they still believe having so many unplanned children is still a sign of wealth. So they're still bringing kids, children, unplanned, still into poverty, still into broken systems for the traditional pride of having so many kids. Maybe they'll be a source of wealth. They'll marry off others and they can be able to obtain livestock and so on. Then the expected results and assessment. We have, again, a rough overview of the concrete results, that's what it may look like. We're looking forward to approaching, or rather having over 3,000 IGYW in the program, or rather in the project. And then also improved service access, mobile clinics providing services to, again, over 1,000 numbers of IGYW. Community empowerment, formation of about 20 YHCs, that is the youth health committees advocating for SRHR in their various communities, in their various counties and so on. And then how we can be able to do the assessment bit of it is external evaluation, and the expected outcomes, 15% decrease in maternal mortality rates and also 20% increase in contraceptive use in targeted areas. Conclusions, have the impact bit of it, significant improvement in SRHR outcomes, gender equality, obviously bringing the men and the boys on board, and even gender diverse persons. We shouldn't leave the gender diverse persons as well. Why I do consider this best practice, as much as it's a proposed best practice for improving SRHR, it's replicability, engaging the community, and also just creating sustainable improvements. Recommendations, continuous training, lots of capacity building, especially for the healthcare providers. And then we also have community involvement as well. Next slide. We have the further reading from where I did my research and just a few of the resources that I was able to attach on the slide. We have WHO, we have UNFPA, and also we have the Kenya Ministry of Health on the National Reproductive Health Policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that was the presentation from all 8 of our abstract presenters. Abstract presenters, I'll ask that you just come to the stage for a quick photo shoot. We leave you with about 15 minutes of break. Our Director of Programs, where are you? Can I proceed? Okay, so we have 15 minutes of break before we move on to our various breakouts. So we'll ask that all of us are quite quick. I'll also just give an opportunity for one comment, reflection, a generic reflection on our abstract presentations. Time has been our limitation, but I'm happy to receive just one reflection from the crowd. Anyone? Yes, please. Thank Thank you, Fallon.
Yeah, thank you very much. Congratulations to all presenters. It's very well informed presentations. I just wanted to say something on the part of Lesotho presenters. They succeeded to have 2 girls to participate in the chiefs meeting, which is a very high-level meeting. But then I asked if that was only that meeting, or there was a certain agreement whereby after every interval of time during the other meeting, they will also have that opportunity. But also if there was inclusion of boys, because the boys would also grow to be chiefs sometimes later, so that they should know from the beginning that we have issues to consider in regard to the welfare, etc., HR issues of the young people. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for those comments. Like I said in the morning, there was the program that is available online. It has a mistakes, so I wanted to just highlight those mistakes so that as we leave this room and go to the different breakout rooms, we are guided. So we have Lenana 1, which is this room that we are in, which will have the Redia Academy from 11:30 right up to 1 o'clock, and then we break for lunch. Bongware Inya, it's downstairs on the ground floor. So you take this lift 1 step down, and as soon as you get out, it's there is a building in there. And can I have the next slide, please? That will be capacity building. And then Bongware Punch is the same. Go down 1 step down, turn right. It's there. It's the main SRHR and main engagement prioritization. English is hard. The other one, the Bongware Ballroom. The ballroom, as you go out of the lift, it's the first room you see out. It's UNESCO West and Central Africa. So this is the one that is mostly mistaken. On the program, it says that it's on the second floor. It's actually on the ground floor. As you go out of this lift, it's the room out on your right. So this is for Education Saves Lives and Multiple Voices, a unified narrative for collective action. Just to give highlights on this, it's a commitment on CSE that the UNESCO has led in West and Central Africa, endorsed by 24 ministers in West and Central Africa, and UNESCO is looking at the next step forward. So for those partners that are implementing in the region, it would be good to join it. Thank you so much. Enjoy your coffee, and may I please ask that we keep it short so that we keep the tea short so that we can start out on time. And for the afternoon sessions, we would share the programs and the rooms again. Thank you so much. Enjoy your coffee.